It started with a text message that wasn't meant for me. 3 years of marriage, and our downfall began with a simple electronic ping at 2:17 a.m. I wasn't snooping. I've never been that wife. But when James's phone lit up the darkness of our bedroom while he was taking a shower, illuminating his nightstand with that harsh blue glow, I glanced over instinctively. The preview was enough. Miss you already. Last night was incredible. My stomach dropped before my brain could even process what I was reading. There's something about that moment, that split second when you realize your life is about to change forever, that feels like free falling through ice water. I picked up his phone. No password required. We'd always had that trust. The irony wasn't lost on me even then. The message was from someone named Mike from work. Mike, who apparently used heart emojis and talked about the softness of James's hair. Mike, who wasn't a Mike at all. I scrolled up. Hundreds of messages, thousands, dating back 7 months. Pictures I wish I could scrub from my memory. Plans made while I thought he was working late. Sweet nothings exchanged while he lay next to me in our bed. The shower water was still running. I sat there, trembling, his phone clutched in my hand as if it were a live grenade. I felt nauseous, disoriented, like I'd woken up in someone else's life, but it was mine. My life, my husband, my betrayal. I heard the water shut off. My heart raced. Should I confront him now? Throw the phone at him? Scream until my lungs gave out? Or should I say nothing, pretend I hadn't seen, buy myself time to think? I placed the phone back exactly where it had been, lay down, and closed my eyes. Feigning sleep while my world collapsed felt like the greatest performance of my life. James came to bed, kissed my shoulder, a casual gesture that once brought comfort, but now scorched my skin. I felt the mattress dip under his weight, heard his breathing slow as he drifted off to sleep, peaceful and unburdened, while I stared at the ceiling, wide awake. Morning came after what felt like years. I watched the sunrise through our bedroom window, painting our walls with the same golden hue that had filled our wedding day. 5 years ago. A lifetime ago. Over coffee, James kissed my forehead and said he'd be home late. Again. A client dinner. Again. The lie slid off his tongue so effortlessly that I almost doubted what I'd seen. Almost. Is everything okay? He asked, noticing my silence. I looked at this man, this stranger wearing my husband's face, and managed a smile. Just tired. After he left, I called in sick to work. The house felt cavernous, haunted by the ghost of what I thought we had. I wandered from room to room, touching photos of us, souvenirs from trips, the quilt his mother had made for our wedding. Were any of these memories real? Had he been thinking of someone else even then? I sat at our kitchen island, where we'd shared countless meals and dreams, and made a list. Cold, practical steps to take when your life shatters. Call a lawyer. Check our accounts. Find a place to stay. My hand shook as I wrote. This wasn't supposed to be my story. We were supposed to start trying for a baby this year. We had plans. Renovating the guest room into a nursery. A trip to Italy for our anniversary. Growing old in the house we'd stretched ourselves thin to buy. But life doesn't follow the scripts we write for it. And as the shock began to harden into something sharper, colder, I realized I had a choice to make. I could fall apart, or I could rise. By noon, I'd called a lawyer. By 2, I'd moved half our savings into a separate account. By 4, I'd packed a suitcase. Not to leave, not yet, but to be ready. The ball of grief in my chest had transformed into something else, something with edges. When evening came, I didn't cry. I waited. For the first time since we'd met, I saw James with clear eyes, and I was ready for the confrontation that would change both our lives forever. The clock on our living room wall ticked so loudly it seemed to echo. 8 o'clock came and went, then 9, then 10. I sat in the armchair facing our front door, the room dim except for a single lamp. His text from earlier, "Be home around 8, glowed from my phone screen like a taunt. When headlights finally swept across our front windows at 11:37, I didn't move. The key fumbled in the lock. He was whistling. Actually whistling as he stepped into our home, our life, carrying the scent of unfamiliar cologne and betrayal. James froze when he saw me sitting there, The smile dropped from his face, replaced by concern that seemed so genuine it made my blood boil. "Emily? Why are you sitting in the dark? Is everything okay?" I studied him. This man I'd shared a bed with for 5 years. His slightly crooked tie. The hair I'd run my fingers through countless times, now styled differently than when he'd left this morning. The wedding ring still on his finger. The absolute audacity of it all. "How's Mike?" I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. The color drained from his face. He set his keys down with deliberate slowness, buying time. "Mike? Or should I call her Rebecca? That is her real name, right? The one you've been sleeping with for 7 months while I've been here, planning our future?" His expression shifted through shock, denial, calculation, and finally landed on something resembling remorse. But it wasn't for the affair. It was for being caught. I can explain." "Don't." The word sliced through the air between us. "Don't you dare call me that right now." He took a step toward me, hands raised in placation. "It's not what you think." A laugh escaped me, sharp and foreign to my own ears. "It's exactly what I think. I saw everything, James. The messages, the pictures, the hotel receipts, the plans you two were making. I hadn't actually seen hotel receipts, but his wince confirmed they existed. "It was a mistake," he said, voice dropping into the soft, persuasive tone he used when selling ideas to clients. "A stupid mistake. It didn't mean anything. 7 months of mistakes?" I stood up then, my body thrumming with a strange energy. "Plans to meet her family next month? That doesn't sound meaningless to me." His eyes widened slightly. He hadn't realized how much I knew. He ran a hand through his hair. The gesture I once found endearing now made my skin crawl. "I love you," he tried. "Only you. This thing with Rebecca, it just happened. I was going to end it." "When?" I demanded. "Before or after our anniversary trip that you suggested we cancel last week. Before or after you told me you weren't ready for children yet. The pieces were falling into place now. His recent distance, the sudden business trips, the way he'd stopped talking about our future. I'd attributed it to work stress. What a fool I'd been. "I've already called a lawyer," I said, watching his face carefully. "I've moved money. I've documented everything." Panic flashed in his eyes. "You don't need to do that. We can work through this. People make mistakes, Emily. Marriages survive this kind of thing all the time. Not our marriage." The certainty in my voice surprised even me. "Not after this." He switched tactics then, anger replacing his calculated remorse. "You're overreacting. It was just sex. It's not like I fell in love with her." The words hit like physical blows, but I refused to flinch. If it was just sex, that would almost be easier to understand. "But you've been living a double life, making plans, lying to my face every single day, looking me in the eyes and promising forever while building a life with someone else. That's not fair." "Fair?" The word tasted bitter. "Was it fair when I sat in the doctor's office alone last month because you were stuck at work? When really you were with her? Was it fair when you made me feel crazy for asking why you were so distant lately?" He had no answer for that. "I want you to leave," I said quietly. "Tonight. This is my house too," he countered, his jaw tight with defiance. "Actually, it's not." I reached for the folder on the side table and handed it to him. "The mortgage is in my name. We both know your credit was too damaged from your last relationship. Ironic, isn't it?" He flipped through the papers, his face darkening. "You can't just throw me out." "I can. And I am." I pointed to the suitcase I'd packed for him, waiting by the stairs. "There's enough for a few days. You can come back for the rest when I'm not here." "Where am I supposed to go?" Desperation crept into his voice. "I hear Rebecca has a lovely apartment," I replied, surprised by my own coldness. "Though she might not be thrilled to see you once she learns you've been lying to her, too." His confusion was almost comical. "What are you talking about? You told her we were separated, didn't you? That we were already getting divorced? That's what the messages said." His silence was confirmation enough. The house felt cavernous in the days after James left. His absence created a strange hollowness that echoed with every step I took. Even with his belongings still scattered throughout our home, his books on the shelves, his expensive coffee machine on the counter, his running shoes by the door. It was as if he'd never really lived here at all. The James I thought I knew had been a mirage, a character he'd played while his true self existed somewhere else, with someone else. I called in sick to work for a week. My boss, Sarah, didn't press for details when I told her I was dealing with personal issues. Perhaps the rawness in my voice was explanation enough. I spent those days alternating between paralyzing grief and startling clarity. One moment I'd be curled on the bathroom floor, sobbing until my ribs ached. The next, I'd be methodically sorting through financial records, speaking calmly with lawyers, changing the locks with steady hands. Sleep came in fractured increments, if at all. I'd jolt awake at odd hours, reaching instinctively for the warmth of a body that was no longer there, then remembering why with a fresh wave of pain each time. The betrayal felt physical, like something corrosive slowly eating through my insides. James called incessantly for the first 3 days. I let everything go to voicemail. His messages evolved from apologetic to angry to pleading, sometimes within the same rambling minute. He'd made a mistake. He wanted to come home. He deserved a chance to explain. Rebecca meant nothing. We could go to counseling. He loved me. Only me. Always me. On the 4th day, the flowers started arriving. Roses. Lilies. My favorites. I threw them all in the trash without reading the cards. On the 5th day, I changed my phone number. My mother flew in from Phoenix on day 6. She took one look at me, hollow-eyed, 15 pounds lighter, and cried. Then she rolled up her sleeves and got to work. She cooked, cleaned, fielded calls from concerned friends, and sat with me through the nights when sleep refused to come. She didn't offer platitudes or tell me everything would be okay. Instead, she told me about her own divorce 30 years earlier, how she'd thought her life was over at 42, how she'd built something better from the ashes. "This isn't the end of your story," she said one evening as we sat on the porch swing, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors too beautiful for such an ugly time. "It's just the end of a chapter." When she left after 2 weeks, I felt stronger. Not healed, nowhere close, but no longer in danger of drowning in my own grief. I returned to work. The routine helped, giving structure to days that might otherwise have dissolved into formless pain. My colleagues were kind but uncertain around me, having heard rumors but no details. I didn't offer any. The pity in their eyes was already unbearable. 1 month after D-Day, Discovery Day, as I'd started calling it in my head, I ran into Rebecca at the grocery store. I'd seen pictures of her, of course, but they hadn't captured the nervous energy that seemed to vibrate from her skin, or the way her eyes darted around like a cornered animal's. She spotted me first. I saw recognition flash across her face, followed by something like shame. She abandoned her half-filled cart and turned to flee, but I called out her name before I could stop myself. She froze, turned slowly. "You should know," I said, my voice carrying across the produce section, "that he told me you were just a fling, that you meant nothing, that it was just physical." Her face crumpled. "He told me you two were separated, that you'd fallen out of love years ago but were waiting until after tax season to file for divorce." We stared at each other, 2 women connected by the same lie, the same liar. "He's living with you now?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. My private investigator, a necessity for the divorce, had confirmed it. She nodded, twisting her hands. He had nowhere else to go. The irony almost made me laugh. "And you believed that? A man who could afford $300 dinners had nowhere to go except your apartment?" Confusion flickered across her face. 300? We've never... She stopped, understanding dawning. There's someone else. It wasn't a question. We ended up at a coffee shop 2 doors down, sharing stories, comparing timelines, unraveling the elaborate web of deception James had spun around us both. Rebecca wasn't the villain I'd constructed in my darkest moments. She was younger than me, yes, and beautiful in a way that had made me question everything about myself in those first terrible days. But she was also a victim of the same manipulative man. "I feel so stupid," she whispered, tears tracking silently down her cheeks. "Don't," I said firmly. "He's the one who should feel stupid. He's about to lose both of us." For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than grief or rage. It was a fragile, tentative feeling, but I recognized it all the same. Hope. Rebecca and I exchanged phone numbers that day in the coffee shop, a surreal alliance forming between us. Neither of us planned to contact the other. It was more of a symbolic exchange, an acknowledgement that we were no longer unwitting pawns in James's game. Yet 3 days later, my phone lit up with her name. "He's been withdrawing large amounts of cash," she said without preamble. "5,000 last week, another 3,000 yesterday." My stomach tightened. The accounts are still linked to my notifications. I'd been so focused on the emotional wreckage that I'd neglected to monitor the financial battlefield. He's preparing for something. My lawyer confirmed my suspicions the next day. James was attempting to hide assets before the divorce proceedings began in earnest. Without Rebecca's warning, I might have missed it entirely. I invited her to my house, our house, the following evening. We sat on opposite ends of the sofa where James and I had once planned our future. Two women connected by betrayal, comparing notes like detectives piecing together a crime scene. Her stories filled gaps in mine. My revelations completed hers. Together, we assembled the true picture of the man we'd both loved. 3 years, she said, staring into her wine glass. That's how long my last relationship lasted before I found out he was married. And then I fall for James, who swore he'd never lie to me. A bitter laugh escaped her. I really know how to pick them. He told me he was working late on the Johnson account, I said, scrolling through my calendar. What was he actually doing October 17th? Rebecca checked her phone. We were at his friend Mark's cabin upstate. He said you were visiting your sister. I didn't have a sister. As the night progressed, anger gave way to something unexpected. Laughter. Incredulous, painful, liberating laughter at the absurdity of it all. At James's audacity, his elaborate deceptions, the sheer energy he must have expended maintaining his house of lies. He told me he was allergic to shellfish, Rebecca said, wiping tears from her eyes. Made a huge deal about checking menus before we went anywhere. He eats shrimp like it's going extinct, I countered. Has a standing order at that seafood place on Elm. By midnight, Rebecca and I weren't friends exactly, but we'd become something unique. Comrades united against a common enemy, extracting strength from shared pain. The confrontation came sooner than either of us anticipated. 2 days later, James showed up unannounced at my doorstep, demanding to speak with me. I was about to send him away when Rebecca's car pulled into the driveway behind his. She'd been dropping off financial documents I needed. James's face contorted with panic as he glanced between us. What is she doing here? Supporting me, I replied calmly. Something you clearly never did. His composure cracked. You two have been talking? About me? That's insane. Rebecca stepped forward, arms crossed. What's insane is telling Emily I meant nothing while telling me she was practically out of your life. Or draining our accounts while preaching about wanting to work things out, I added. James's face flushed, then paled. He'd never anticipated this scenario. The two women he'd manipulated comparing notes, standing together against him. His carefully constructed parallel lives were collapsing inward. This isn't... You're both... He stumbled backward. This is a setup. No, James, I said. This is consequence. Rebecca pulled out her phone. Should I tell Emily about Natalie too? The one you were with last weekend while I thought you were at a conference? His jaw slackened. A third woman. Of course there was a third. Something inside me that had remained tethered to hope. That perhaps there was still something worth salvaging in the man I'd married. Finally snapped free. The James I loved had never existed. My lawyer will be contacting yours regarding the funds you've illegally withdrawn, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I suggest you cooperate fully unless you want fraud charges added to your problems. And I'll be gone from the apartment by Friday, Rebecca added. You can explain to your landlord why you'll be covering the rent alone. As we stood there on my front porch, two women who'd entered this nightmare as strangers but would exit as allies, I felt a peculiar sense of power. Not the vindictive kind I'd fantasized about in those early days of heartbreak, but something more profound. The power of truth, of seeing clearly, of refusing to be a victim. James slunk back to his car, defeated not by schemes or vengeance, but simply by his own actions brought to light. Well, Rebecca said, as his taillights disappeared down the street. That felt good. For the first time in weeks, I smiled without reservation. Yes, I agreed. It really did. Divorce proceedings drag up the past like a dredging operation, pulling forgotten moments to the surface to be examined under harsh light. Our first date, the proposal, the shared dreams. Each memory was now tainted with questions. Was he already planning his escape route? Was anything ever real? My lawyer, Diana, was a force of nature. A 60-something woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She'd seen countless cases like mine, yet treated each revelation of James's deceit with fresh indignation on my behalf. He's claiming the business trips were legitimate, she told me during our fourth meeting, glasses perched on the end of her nose as she reviewed his deposition. Says the company will verify. Check the Jensen account specifically, I replied, remembering Rebecca's timeline. He claimed to be in Chicago for those meetings, but he was actually in Miami with her. Diana's smile was predatory. Already on it. The weeks blurred together in a haze of paperwork, negotiations, and discoveries. James had hidden more than just cash. There were accounts I'd never known about. A rental property in his brother's name. Even a motorcycle purchased 6 months earlier. Diana documented each finding with meticulous care. I sold our house. I couldn't bear to live surrounded by memories of a marriage that had been hollower than I'd realized. The real estate market was strong, and the profit gave me a cushion to start over. I found a modern apartment downtown, all clean lines and empty spaces waiting to be filled with a new life. Rebecca moved to Seattle for a job opportunity. We still texted occasionally, sharing updates like distant relatives connected by an unusual family tie. She was dating again, cautiously. I wasn't ready. The final divorce hearing arrived on a Tuesday morning, 9 months after that fateful text message had illuminated our bedroom. The courtroom was colder than I expected, the wooden benches uncomfortable beneath my gray suit. James sat across the aisle, looking smaller somehow, less substantial. The man who had once filled my world now seemed diminished, ordinary. His lawyer had advised him to settle. Diana's evidence was too damning, his financial manipulations too blatant. The judge reviewed the agreement with clinical efficiency. James would retain his personal property and certain investments. I would keep the proceeds from the house sale, my retirement accounts, and receive a settlement that acknowledged his attempted fraud. When the gavel fell, finalizing the end of our marriage, I felt a curious lightness. Not happiness. I was still too raw for that, but relief. The kind that comes with setting down a heavy burden you've carried so long you've forgotten how it feels to stand straight. James approached me in the hallway afterward, his expression a mix of resentment and something that might have been regret. I never meant for any of this to happen, he said, hands shoved deep in his pockets. I studied him. This stranger I'd once pledged forever to. Which part? The cheating? The lying? Or getting caught? He flinched. I did love you, Emily. In my way. Your way wasn't enough. I adjusted my purse strap, ready to walk away from him for the last time. And I deserve better. Are you and Rebecca still... He trailed off, unable to articulate the question. Still comparing notes on what a liar you are? I finished for him. Not really. We've both moved on to more interesting topics. His face flushed. I made mistakes. I'm not a monster. For a moment I felt a flicker of the old tenderness, the desire to soothe, to understand, to forgive, but only for a moment. No, not a monster, I conceded. Just a man who made choices. And now we're both living with them. Diana appeared at my elbow, a steadying presence. Everything all right here? James nodded stiffly and retreated toward the elevator. I watched him go, wondering how it was possible to have loved someone so completely, and now feel so little. Ready? Diana asked, briefcase in hand. Outside, spring had arrived while I wasn't paying attention. The trees lining the courthouse steps were heavy with pink blossoms, and the air smelled of possibility. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with it. Yes, I said. I'm ready. That evening, I invited my closest friends over to my new apartment. Kate brought champagne. Michael and Tom arrived with takeout from my favorite restaurant. Sophia gave me a plant. Something that grows, she said simply. We didn't toast to new beginnings or closed chapters or any of the cliches people offer after divorce. Instead, We talked and laughed and existed together in a space that was entirely mine, untouched by betrayal. Later, after everyone had gone, I stood on my small balcony overlooking the city lights. Grief still visited sometimes, slipping in through unguarded moments. But increasingly, it was accompanied by its gentler sibling, growth. The woman who had sat trembling in the dark, waiting for her husband to return from his lover's arms, was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who understood that while love might not always last, self-respect could be eternal. 18 months after D-Day, I barely recognized my own life, in the best possible way. My apartment had evolved from a blank slate to a personal sanctuary, filled with art I'd collected on solo weekend trips, plants that somehow thrived under my previously non-existent green thumb, and furniture chosen solely for my comfort, rather than to impress guests or match someone else's taste. I'd taken a risk professionally too, leaving my secure position at the architecture firm to start my own interior design consultancy. My first client was Diana, my divorce lawyer, who'd hired me to reimagine her firm's outdated offices. That led to referrals, which led to actual choice about which projects to take on. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd found my voice designing spaces for others when my own had been silenced for so long in my marriage. "You seem different," my mother observed during her spring visit. We were sharing breakfast on my balcony, the morning sun warming our shoulders. More present. I considered this as I stirred honey into my tea. I think I am. When I was with James, I was always anticipating. His moods, his needs, his reactions. I lived in the future tense, always preparing for what might happen next. And now I just live. I smiled, realizing the truth of it as I spoke. Right here, right now. Dating again had been a strange wilderness to navigate. My first attempts were disasters. I either scrutinized every word a man said for potential deception or shared too much too soon, trauma dumping my divorce story before the appetizers arrived. Eventually, I learned to find middle ground, to trust cautiously, to reveal myself in measured doses. There was Daniel, the landscape architect who taught me about native plants, but couldn't understand why I needed so much alone time. Then Michael, brilliant and kind, but already in a committed relationship with his academic career. A few others who blurred together in a parade of coffee dates and polite kisses goodnight. And then, unexpectedly, there was Evan. We met at a mutual friend's gallery opening. He was photographing the event, moving unobtrusively through the crowd, capturing moments rather than manufacturing them. When he asked for my number, I hesitated just long enough for him to add, "Or not." No pressure. That somehow made me want to say yes. Our first date lasted 5 hours. Conversation flowing from childhood memories to travel disasters to passionate debates about whether cereal is soup. It isn't, despite his compelling arguments. He didn't try to kiss me afterward, just squeezed my hand and said he'd like to see me again. 3 months in, I told him everything about James. We were hiking in the state park, the forest canopy filtering sunlight into dappled patterns on the trail. I spoke without looking at him, afraid of what I might see in his expression. When I finished, he was quiet for so long that I finally glanced over. "Thank you for trusting me with that," he said simply. "Aren't you going to say something reassuring? Promise you'd never do that to me?" The words escaped before I could stop them. Evan considered this carefully. I could. But promises are just words until they're backed by time and actions. He adjusted his backpack straps. "I'd rather show you who I am than tell you who I'm not." It was the perfect answer. We moved slowly, both carrying baggage from previous relationships. He'd been engaged once, to a woman who decided 6 weeks before the wedding that she wasn't ready for marriage after all. Our respective wounds created a shared carefulness, a mutual respect for emotional boundaries. I still had moments of panic, nights when I'd wake suddenly, convinced I'd missed some obvious sign, some glaring red flag. Times when an unexplained delay in his response to a text would send me spiraling into worst-case scenarios. But gradually, these episodes became less frequent, less intense. Healing isn't linear, my therapist reminded me during our monthly sessions. Think of it as a spiral. You'll revisit the same territory, but from a higher vantage point each time. The most unexpected development in my post-James life was my friendship with Rebecca. She'd returned to the city for a new position at a tech startup, and we met occasionally for drinks or gallery openings. There was something freeing about connecting with someone who had witnessed the same storm from a different shore. "I saw him last week," she mentioned during one such evening, "at that new restaurant on Pike Street." My wine glass paused halfway to my lips. "And?" She shrugged. "And nothing. He was with some woman, blonde, laughing too loud at whatever he was saying. I felt nothing, except maybe pity for her." "Do you think he'll ever change?" I asked, surprising myself with the question. Rebecca considered this, twirling her cocktail straw. "People can change, but they have to want to, and they have to do the work. James always wanted the easy path." I nodded, realizing I hadn't thought about James in weeks. He was becoming abstract in my memory, a cautionary tale rather than a living wound. That night, after Evan had fallen asleep beside me, his arm draped loosely around my waist, I lay awake thinking about the paths that had led me here. The pain that had felt unbearable had also been transformative, not because suffering is somehow noble or necessary, but because surviving it had revealed strengths I hadn't known I possessed. I turned carefully to study Evan's profile in the dim light from the window. I didn't know if this relationship would last forever. I'd learned the hard way that forever is never guaranteed, but I did know that I was capable of loving without losing myself, of trusting without surrendering my agency, of building something new from the rubble of what had been destroyed. And for now, that was enough.